Hello, friends. Welcome to Experian's Data Talk, a show featuring data science leaders and technologists from around the world. My name is Mike Delgado, and this is episode number 109. Today, we get a chance to learn from Louise Maynard-Atem. Louise earned her PhD in materials chemistry from the University of Manchester and a master's in science degree in chemistry from the University of Nottingham. She currently serves as our innovation specialist at the Experian office in London. In today's episode, we chat about her constant curiosity and why she's always pushing herself to keep growing, which often means never getting too comfortable. She talks about how her PhD in chemistry prepared her for the work she's doing now at Experian, and also the challenges of working as an entrepreneur in a large, complex organization. She shares steps for getting buy-in on new projects from key stakeholders, and also the leadership qualities that she looks for when deciding to work for somebody. She also talks about giving back and why she enjoys mentoring and helping girls pursue careers in STEM. And at the end of our conversation, she shares a funny story about how she initially declined the job offer from Experian, and then goes into what changed her mind. Louise is a mover and shaker. I had so much fun chatting with her. Here's our conversation. Louise, thank you so much for being on Data Talk.
No problem. I have been catching up on episodes recently, so I'm pretty excited to be here.
I thought it'd be great if we can start off just with your role here at Experian.
So innovation specialist, technically innovation intrapreneur, which is, I don't think it's a real word, but we'll go with it anyway. It's basically somebody who is trying to start new businesses, new things, new products or services within sort of the structure of a large existing organization. So rather than an entrepreneur who starts a business from scratch, it's like starting a business within a business. So we call it an intrapreneur instead.
I like that. And that's got to be super, super challenging, especially with such a large organization like Experian. We have so many different businesses. There's a lot of processes, and along with that, sometimes there's bureaucracy that's involved. What are some of the challenges that entrepreneurs face when trying to launch new ideas?
Everything that you've just said. Bureaucracy. We are a large organization. Experian is a weirdly complex organization as well, because we've got the different product lines and the different regions, and all of the different bits of the businesses work quite differently. So it's always a challenge when you're in an environment like that, because there is so much business as usual that you need to kind of jockey for position alongside everything that's already going on. So the biggest challenge I would probably say is getting the buy-in from people within the business units, because, they have their day jobs, they have their targets that they have to meet that are usually over a relatively short term, like quarters this and 1 year forward that it's quite difficult to sort of bring them out of that world and into thinking, okay, that's what makes Experian money now, but what's going to make Experian money in 3 years time, 5 years time? So it is complicated, I suppose is the best word, to try and get people thinking not just about the near term, but about the medium term and the far term as well. But I found in Experian that people are really quite excited by what it is that we're trying to do. I think lots of people want to do more of this, but because they are so busy with their day jobs that they kind of try and do it in and around everything else that they're trying to do. So when the data exchange team was launched, which was about 18 months ago now, I think everybody was really excited that we would actually have a specific team focused on doing new and innovative things and being responsible for the new products and services and things that Experian are going to be delivering in 3 years or 5 years or 10 years. So now when they have these ideas, they can come to us as a team and say, oh, I really think that Experian should be looking at this. These are the reasons why. I don't necessarily have the bandwidth right now to take this forward, but I hand it over to you guys and you see what you can do with it, and you see if you can make it fly. So we've actually had a really warm reception within the business. Everyone's been really excited to work with us, to sort of give us support where they can. So it's actually been, I guess, easier this time around. So I did it before in my previous business, and I think it was much more difficult to do it there because people weren't as receptive. But I found that everyone in Experian is really on board with the idea. So that makes my job easier.
That is so cool, because I feel like that is what obviously what you're doing is what's driving the future growth of Experian. Like, you're looking at the future, what's going to be useful to our clients, to our people that are using our products.
Yeah.
Like you said, 5 years down the line, 10 years down the line. So you're thinking of these things. And what's hard, especially like on my side of it, like we are so driven by our goals, right?
Yes.
We're fixed on current products, current
Yes.
things that we're doing, and we're highly motivated. We're trying to get things done. And so when we're super hyper focused on our own goals, it's very hard
Yeah.
sometimes to like break
Pull
away and
yourself
like,
out of that. Yeah.
oh, something 5 years from now, well, I got to focus on this thing. So like,
Yes.
how do you kind of navigate like that? Because like you said, like the stakeholders, the people that are in the businesses that are highly focused on their current goals, and you need to like record scratch. Let's
Yeah.
talk about this other thing. How do you kind of navigate that?
Yeah. So we try and take an idea from an idea that somebody's written down on a post-it,
Mm.
and do the initial sort of testing and the proving out and the sort of getting evidence to support assumptions, so that we're never going to go to anybody in the business who absolutely has competing priorities and say, oh, here's this idea, go run with it. It's okay, let's prove it out. Let's prove that there is market. Let's prove that customers actually want it. Let's build POCs or MVPs or any of the other cool three-letter acronyms I could throw in there. But let's build it to the point where it's actually something that's working, that's functioning, that we've tested with customers or with consumers, and we've proved out all of the beginning stuff and the niggly bits. So we will only hand it over to a business when we know that it's something valuable that they can go after, so that it's something that's worth them shifting some of their priorities around to try and put it right at the top of the queue. So we would never say, oh, here's an idea, here's some slides, off you go, because guaranteed it will fall off the bottom of the to-do list faster than you could blink. So we try and get as far down the line in terms of proving it out and removing any of the uncertainty before we hand it over to the business. And by that point, we have measured and checked with various different parties or different businesses and customers to say, this is a real market here. Experian has a real opportunity to make X number of amount of revenue. Now, at this point, when it's getting to sort of operationalize and scale, that's when we would hand it over to the business, when we know it's like a credible thing that we want them to be working on.
What do you do about those ideas that are like super exciting, but there isn't enough like data to support that thing, right? Because sometimes you're working on something where it's like you can get data on what the market wants and your studies, but then there's those things that are like really cool ideas, but you're like, oh man, I don't have enough data to support this.
Yeah, that's always really frustrating, because sometimes you do just want to do the really cool and exciting things, but if the data isn't there to support it, if we can't find the evidence, then we can't justify spending time and spending resource on it. We try not to throw things like that away. We think, okay, maybe the market isn't ready for us now, but maybe in a year's time or however many months' time, it might be ready, or there might be more evidence to say, yes, okay, now we should push forward with this. But if there isn't enough to convince us that people want it or there's a market for it, we kind of put it in our like back pocket sort of thing and think, let's revisit this later. If it's that cool of an idea and we really, really don't want to give it up, let's revisit it later, and maybe the market conditions will have changed, or maybe consumer opinions will have changed, and there will be space for something like this, or space for us to explore it. So we won't throw it away if we think it's really, really cool, but we won't just push ahead with something just because it's cool, even though there's no obvious place for it in the market. So.
With your work, you are working across different business teams. You're working with leaders and stakeholders. And I was wondering if you have advice for the young data scientists listening in who are just beginning to or looking to move into like a leadership role like yourself, where they want to be able to speak to the stakeholders and make convincing cases.
I think we're quite fortunate in Experian. I can't speak for lots of other businesses, but in Experian, I found that a lot of our senior leadership team and our very senior leadership team are super easy to talk to, and they're very approachable, and they will hear you out. I mean, their time is very pressured, but they will hear you out, and they're very supportive of you going to them with new ideas or new thinking. I think what they really want to see is that, you've got a really clear sort of hypothesis. You've got evidence to suggest that, we think we should invest in X because, and you can make a really clear case. And also that you're passionate about something, because the best way to sell an idea is to actually be really, really passionate about it and have the data that backs you up, or that supports whatever it is you're trying to sell people on. So I think you can't manufacture that passion. So it has to be something that you're really, really sort of involved with or really keen to pursue. And then if you can get the data and the evidence to say that this is why we should invest, and you can put a really clear case forward, I think certainly our senior leadership would be really keen to hear that. And I think they're always keen to hear from people across different bits of the business. So they have a massive bird's eye view of everything that's going on, but they're not there day to day, down in the weeds, down in the detail. And so sometimes it's really useful for them to actually hear from people who are more at that coal face, I suppose, because they don't really get those opportunities very often.
That is really, really good advice. I remember early in my career, my emails and the way that I communicated my messages were too long. They were too long-winded, because you're trying to provide all these arguments right into one long email, and it's like a book. And leaders don't have that much time to get into the weeds.
I mean, I'm kind of the same. I'm naturally not a very succinct person, not at all. Anybody in my team will tell you this. My first draft of anything probably runs to the tens and hundreds of slides or the thousands of words. So I tend to draft things and then have other people read them for me. And I will explain what I think the key points are. And they're like, great, okay, let's put that in a bullet pointed list. Because the first draft of anything that I write is not the draft I end up sending. So I will share it around with other team members, and they help me be cut through when I've used 5 adjectives when one would have done sort of thing. So I know it's not naturally my strength. So I sort of rely on the people around me to help me hone my message and make it super sharp and super pointed, so that people aren't saying, oh, well, that was a really nice essay, Louise, but I don't really want to read it. So yeah.
That's good. I mean, well, that's awesome. It just shows your self-awareness, and as you're trying to hone your messaging, you're getting feedback from other people. How can I make this sharper? How can I make this more compelling to this particular person, especially with those who have worked with that person, that knows the types of things that they'd want to hear from you. That is that wisdom is really, really important.
It is. And I found that having mentors within the business, people who you can be open to saying dumb stuff to, or that you can send the really long first draft and they will say, put a big red pen through, you didn't need this paragraph, you didn't need this paragraph, you actually only needed these 3 bullet points. So having people like that you're comfortable with making mistakes in front of I found really, really helpful.
Oh, I love that. That is great advice too. Looking for those mentors in the organization. When you are, as you've been here at Experian, what are the things that you look for in somebody where you're that would be somebody I totally want to spend more time with because I like the way that they are doing X, Y, or Z?
Yeah, I mean, I've not been short of finding mentors in Experian. I'll be honest, there's been lots of people that are willing to help, so that's great. But I think for me, and everybody does it differently, but I kind of am one of those instant spark sort of people. And so when you meet somebody, you kind of just know straight away because you get on with them, you have a similar worldview to them, you laugh at the same jokes sort of thing. So I kind of know when I meet somebody, it's okay, I get on, I kind of immediately trust you, and I wouldn't be afraid to say something stupid or say something that might not be quite perfect in front of you. So some people just make you feel at ease that way. And I find with mentors, that's really important because I need to feel that, it's a safe space to be totally honest, to be really candid, to make mistakes. So I think it's that sense of, oh yeah, I think you get me and I get you. And that's how I judge sort of mentors. I think I'd also make the distinction between sort of mentors and sponsors. So someone who's a sponsor is someone who's willing to I don't know, use their relationship capital on your behalf. And I think I look for a very different sort of person than I would for a mentor. So in a sponsor, I'm okay, this person is at whatever next level of the business that I would like to try and get to. We have a really good working relationship. I've done work for this person and they've been impressed by it. They've given me good feedback, that sort of thing. So I look for more the professional rapport with a sponsor and the personal rapport with a mentor.
Hmm. That's a really good distinction. And actually, I wish I had heard that advice much earlier in my career because I didn't even know those things existed
Yeah.
right out of
No,
college.
it's so helpful. So helpful.
That's really, really good. So, in fact, let's go back to your college days
Oh, wow.
because you have extremely. When I was looking at your LinkedIn profile, you have an extremely impressive academic background. Now, I'd just love to hear your story, like even going back to high school and then making the decision to what program you wanted to go to in college.
Yeah, it was really tough for me actually. So I studied chemistry for a really, really long time. But I didn't originally necessarily want to study chemistry. So I was in love with two subjects. One was like Latin and classical civilizations, and one was chemistry. And I couldn't really do both. So,
Hmm.
because there were no joint honors programs that said you could study like an ancient language and chemistry at the same time. So I had to choose. And I went to my mum, as I do with every big decision I have to make. And she said, "What on earth are you going to do with a degree in classical civilizations?" And it was a good point. It was a very good point. You could argue now that I don't work in chemistry anymore. You could have made the same argument for a chemistry degree. But she's like, you just because you're not going to study it and you're not going to go on and get a degree in this subject, it doesn't mean that it can't still be a passion of yours. It just
Hmm.
probably isn't the most practical thing to study. And she was right. So I thought, okay, I still love Latin and Greek mythology is one of my favorite things of all
Hmm.
time. But I thought she's right. I don't know necessarily what I would do with a degree in mythology, effectively. So I decided to pursue my other passion, which was chemistry, thankfully. And yeah, I just went all the way down that route, and I got some really good advice from my old chemistry teacher. And she said, rather than thinking about, okay, I want to be a doctor or I want to be a lawyer or I want to be an accountant, she's like, just do what you love and everything else will fall into place. And so
Hmm.
that's now my sort of mantra in life. I never think, okay, I need to do X and Y and Z in order to get to A, B, and C. I just think, what do I love doing? Just do that, and the rest will fall into place, which is kind of how I've gone from chemistry to more chemistry to working in government to working in defense to now working in Experian. It's always been, oh yeah, I really like doing that, so I'm going to do more of that. And that's kind of led me on this path of just doing jobs that I really enjoy doing, because that's what's most important to me, I think.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously it's led to great success for you sticking with that passion. And
Mm.
it's interesting where you had that place and time where you had to decide,
Yeah.
like, am I going to pursue this passion of Greek mythology and classical literature and languages and Greek and Latin,
Mm.
or am I going to prioritize chemistry and keep that passion alive because
Yeah.
I can keep reading. I can always do that
Hmm.
personally. Um, but you, I mean, you took that to you got your master's degree, and then you continued on. I mean, that's like grit, drive. Like I'm going to continue on and
Yeah.
getting your PhD. So what led you to like just continue on? Because most people don't pass.
Yeah.
Like first of all, just getting the master's and then going on PhD.
Yeah, I mean, I loved what I love about chemistry still, and I still try and involve myself as much in it as I can, is it's so practical and it's all about experimentation. And so you have an idea and you come up with your hypothesis, and then you'll do various tests or experiments to try and prove or disprove the hypothesis that you had. You'll get your results, and then you will go right back to the start of that whole process and do it again using what you've learned from the first round in the second round, and so on and so on. And I loved the immediacy of chemistry. So, you would do an experiment and you would get your results and you would learn something straight away. And then you would go back and you would learn something new and learn something new and learn something new. And because it was such a practical subject and you don't really get to do as much of the practical elements of chemistry until you get to PhD level, that's kind of what sort of took me through doing my master's, which was kind of half taught, half sort of practical, to the
Mm.
PhD, which was pretty much all practical for 3.5 years. You're just like, here's a lab, off you go, sort of thing. And I got to experiment to my heart's content for 3.5 years, which was great. But I was still learning, and I will always continue to do something if I still think I'm learning something new. As soon as I stop learning, or I think, okay, I'm not taking anything from this anymore, that's when it's time to move on. And for me, that didn't happen, I suppose, until I got to the end of my PhD. And I thought, I've loved this journey. I've loved what I've learned. I've loved the way it's taught me to think and approach problems. I don't necessarily think I would be best served staying in an academic environment. I want to take all of these skills that I've learned and apply them to sort of what I called real world problems. Now, obviously, people in academia would probably be very offended by that. But I mean, problems that, like, a person on the street is having, I wanted to be able to use the skill set that I'd built up to actually impact myself, people around me, my family. And I thought that was a better use of my skills than continuing down the academic route. So I wrote it out right till the very end, got my PhD, and then I thought, okay, it's time to learn in a different setting. So that's
Mm. So it seems like that became another. Was that a similar crossroad for you? Like when you were
it was.
deciding between classics and chemistry?
Yeah, it was actually. It was. I'd spent, gosh, 9 years probably just studying chemistry, and it was a case of, I could continue and I could spend the rest of my life doing this, but I
Hmm.
didn't think I was going to get any further new skills or capability if I did that. So I thought I could stay and I would probably enjoy it, but I don't think I would be learning at the same rate as if I took myself out of this environment and tried to apply what I'd learned to a new environment. So it was
Mm.
a case of, and everybody around me was like, you spent 9 years going to the very highest level of a subject, super, super deep into a subject, and
Yeah.
now you want to go back to being a generalist and start all over again, which lots of people said perhaps wasn't the wisest decision I'd ever made. But I think in retrospect, I think it was the right choice to have made, because I went really deep into a subject and now I find
Mhm.
myself being really quite broad across a number of subjects. And I like having that balance of breadth of understanding, but also depth in certain areas. And I think that's quite a healthy balance for me.
Totally. What did your mom say as you were like at this crossroad?
Yeah, she told me that I should probably, like, I'd spent enough time in university and I should probably go get a real job. So, so yeah, that didn't surprise me so much. She's like, I mean, I get it. You really like learning, but you should get a job at some point. So I did.
So, what was your path then? You earned your PhD. You had been just, doing so much research, like you said, chemistry for 9 years, hyper
Mhm.
focused, extremely knowledgeable with chemistry, and now you're like, okay, I want to continue my growth,
Mhm.
which means for me, in my situation, I want to go into industry.
Yeah.
Tell me about your next steps.
Yeah. So it was difficult actually, because it was like starting all over again, or at least it felt that way at the very beginning. It didn't last for too long, thankfully. But I didn't really have much of a plan about what I was going to do. I just knew I wanted to go somewhere where I would be able to solve big problems for lots of people. And that took me to government, actually, because my logic at the time was, what organizations are there that help the most people? And that was government for me. So they had a sort of like a graduate training scheme that lasts for 2 years, and then you're parachuted into government, and then you decide which area of government you want to stay in and focus on. So I thought, okay, I'll do that. That feels like a really good way to learn lots and lots about government. There will be a really steep learning curve because I literally knew nothing about government other than that it existed. But it was really hard at the beginning because I was joining having done a master's and a PhD, and most of the people I was with were, what, 6, 7, maybe 8 years younger than me, and they had just come out of their undergrad degrees. So I felt like a little bit, or quite a lot, behind the curve. So I saw all of my other friends who were like, had been working for several years at this point. I was doing a graduate role at this age. I felt so much older than everybody else, because I
Mm.
was older than everybody else. So it did feel like maybe I had made a mistake and that I'd actually taken about 10 steps backwards. But when I got over that initial shock of, oh my God, I'm way behind where I should be in life. Once
Mm.
I got into the role and started to, work and get used to things and understand how things worked, it was, I guess the difference was that all the time that I'd spent doing research and whatever meant that I could take those skills and apply them really quite easily to whole new settings. And so after the initial 6 months of feeling like, oh my gosh, I should have just done this when I was 21 and not 29,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
um, it was, I found myself picking things up really, really quickly. And so I moved through that program really quite fast because it was then that the skills that I'd picked up through all these years of research actually really started to kick in and really help me do really well, really quite quickly. So I probably finished the program in maybe half the time that you would normally take, which
Wow.
was nice to see.
Yeah.
Because whilst immediately I thought these skills are of no use to me, I might as well just put them on a shelf because they're not helpful in this setting. I realized moving through the roles that actually I knew lots more than I was giving myself credit for, and that I was able to apply those skills in whole new settings and really pick up that understanding really quite quickly. So it made me feel better, but I had to go through that period of feeling like
Mm.
I'd made the biggest mistake of my life and that I should have just gone back to academia. So it was a rough start, but in the
Yeah.
end, it worked out quite well.
And I think that that is like really common. And in fact,
Mm,
that's like a danger for a lot of us, that the comparing ourselves to others and where
yes.
they're at compared to where I am. And we start to
Yeah,
do that, that can become very detrimental to how we
absolutely.
feel about ourselves. How did you navigate that? Because especially I think for the people listening in, and I've gone through this too,
Hmm.
the the comparing yourselves to others is like can be very dangerous.
Yeah, hugely. And I looked at, so I've had the same best friend since I think I was 11 years old. And one of them's a doctor and one of them's like in marketing and this, that, and the other. And so I would look at where they were and in their roles and in their lives. And I would look at myself and I was like, oh my God, I'm doing a graduate role. I'm about to turn 30. This makes no sense whatsoever. I'm so far behind the curve. But when you sit and you talk to people, you find that they're facing the exact same issues as you. And like my friend who's a medical doctor, she's like, yeah, I should be much further ahead than I am. And then I look at you and you're doing all these exciting things. And I was like, but wait, no, I'm a graduate at 29. Like that doesn't make any sense. So I think everybody is struggling with the exact
Yes.
same issues and the exact same problems, and looking at other people's like highlight reel and comparing it to their
Hmm.
real, everyday life. And it isn't fair. I think we're really, really hard on ourselves in that respect. So I think we just need to remember that really everybody is going through the same thing and having the same doubts. Maybe they're just not saying it. So maybe, ask them the question and you'll be probably really pleasantly surprised to hear that they have the same anxieties and worries as you do. So it just came down to talking to people that put me at ease and made me realize that, okay, maybe I'm not doing so badly.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's really, really good. Because you're right. That is like it's so, so common for us to dwell on or look at, like you said, you phrased it really well, the highlight reel of other people, and then looking at ourselves and in our own situation and going like, well, I don't feel like I'm measuring up to what they're
Yeah.
doing. And I love the way you talked about that and also navigated that process. So you, like you said, you went through this government program. Like in half the time, you were able to like bring in some of the skills that you'd learned in school to help you. And then what happened?
I kind of landed in different roles in government, and I landed in defense as a sector, and
Wow.
I found that I really enjoyed working in that area. It was insanely technical, but it was also really like people focused as well, which is
Mm.
probably not the way a lot of people would think about defense as an industry, but it really is. So I found myself really enjoying that area. So that's the area that I decided to stay in. So I spent some time in government defense. I worked for the Ministry of Defense,
Wow.
and then I moved into private sector defense. I worked for BAE Systems after that, and did a whole heap of roles within BAE. But I think what I loved most about my roles in defense were that they were exactly like all of the work I ever did in chemistry, to be honest.
Mm.
So it was all about, having a hypothesis, being able to prove it, then taking the sort of the results that you gain from that and using that to sort of move the conversation on, or move a project forward. And so I found that I was actually just applying the exact same sort of scientific method in defense as I'd been applying in chemistry for 10 or so years beforehand.
Mm.
So when I realized that actually it was just a completely common way of doing things that wasn't unique to any particular subject, it was actually applicable to all. That really helped me sort of excel, I suppose, in my career, because I realized that all of these skills that I previously thought were completely useless were actually really helping me in spaces like project management and in data analysis and in consulting. So it was really good to start to see like that commonality of skill sets across a lot of different roles within defense. So that was quite exciting, actually.
I mean, that is so cool. Like how you have just like shifted your focus, right? Like
Yeah.
chemistry and then working in government and then moving in defense. I mean, those are like radically different areas of focus, and you
Yes.
just like adapted extremely quickly. What do you think has been helpful for you for adapting? Because I know for a lot of us, like doing new things can be very, very scary.
Yeah. I think I really enjoy doing something new, and I'm one of those probably weird people who really enjoys being uncomfortable. Because I think if I'm comfortable, then I'm probably not learning anything. So I purposely put myself in positions where, you know, I have a steep learning curve and I have to adapt, or there's no other options really. So I enjoy putting myself in those sorts of positions because it means I know that I'm learning. If I feel uncomfortable, it means I'm doing the right thing,
Mm.
even though it doesn't feel very nice at the time. And I guess my philosophy for changing, changing like roles so much is that I try to constantly be learning. I think everybody should be a lifelong learner. And I think in every role you're going to do, you will need to learn some kind of new skill. Um, and I've just been really proactive in doing that. So I spend lots of my time when I'm not working, sort of like studying, because I'm a natural born studier, I think, or reading lots, or devouring information on social media or on Twitter or in newspapers, or things like, or doing various different like online courses. I think every time I make the switch, what makes it easier is that I'm constantly learning something new, and I'm willing to put in the extra effort and time and hard work to make sure that I learn something new. So switching from defense to coming to Experian, so defense to financial services effectively, I spent probably the 3 months prior to joining Experian devouring every piece of information I could find about
Wow.
Experian. Literally, I was reading like annual reports and like the updates with analysts and looking at the share price and all these sorts of things. And it's like, okay,
Mm.
I'm ready to learn something new, and I want to walk in on day one and be on the front foot rather than the back foot. So it was literally every piece of, and I think I still have it now. I set up a Google alert for Experian, so
Good
anytime
for you.
Experian is mentioned in the news, I still get emails about it, and also Experian's competitors too. So I've got one on TransUnion.
Look at you go, man.
Lots
That
of things.
that is so cool. You need to join the PR team, Luis. That is
Well, I
so
was thinking no.
that is so cool
Yeah,
that you were like so like I don't know anybody who does that. I mean, it's so wise to like do that much research. I mean, you're like digging into the annual reports, wanting to know who the leaders are, where the business was headed. Like
yeah.
that's not typical.
No, but I think maybe it's because I was a researcher a long time, walk into anything without having done a huge amount of research. And it really does help. So I got into the business, and Experian, like I said, is a very complicated business. So even though all that research didn't really, it helped, but there was still lots for me to learn when I joined, and still lots for me to learn now. But it just kind of gives you that added bit of confidence, so that when you walk into that room or into that very first meeting, and I know I have this all the time, like one of those people who doesn't always speak up or speak first in meetings, because I'm always in my head thinking, oh, what if I say something dumb? What if I say what I say is not relevant? Then doing all of this research kind of helped me in that, whatever the first meeting was that I had, make what I thought was like a really useful point. And the first useful point was kind of like the big barrier for me to get over to start to feel a bit more comfortable. And because I'd done all of the research on Experian, which I guess is not the approach for everybody, but I felt confident in just making that first point, and then after that, everything got easier.
Well, I think it's fantastic you did that. In fact, one of my mentors pointed out to me because I'd been at Experian for at the time 6 years,
Mm-hmm.
and I never once really looked at the annual report other than like skim through it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I just felt like, oh, that's not really important to me and what I'm doing. And one of my mentors was like, what do you haven't read it? Like you haven't gone through like, and he started asking me questions like, do you know who the business leader is of this business unit? And I was like, no. He's like, that's not good, Mike. That's really not good. And I got, he chastised me, but I was like, it was right. Like,
Mm.
if I want to do a proper job at Experian, I need to know like where the business is headed. Need to know who the leaders are. Like that is like such really helpful background information. And it's so cool that you did that up front.
Yeah.
Because like I said, that's not typical. Now I learned from that mistake. But that's like really wise counsel for anybody who's listening in, who's like looking to join a company, like do that research.
Yeah. There's so much information out there, and there's so much that you can, without a huge amount of effort, actually start to pick up and start to absorb. Because, yes, okay, the internet is maybe having a bit of a bad time of things at the moment, but there is so much useful information out there, and it's literally at your fingertips. So it doesn't take a lot of effort for you to just do a little bit of homework, just so that you walk into the room knowing a little bit more than maybe the next person or you would have done otherwise.
Now, I would love to hear about your choice to join Experian because it's very, very hard to choose a company and a team
Yes.
to join. There's a lot of risk that's involved because, like, okay, I'm going to invest part of my life at this company. Is this really all that is cracked up to be? Like, when I'm reading the annual report, is that culture reflected in the team I'm joining? How did you and why did you choose Experian?
I'll be totally honest with you. I initially said no.
That's what we want. We want honesty here.
I initially said no. And the reason I said no is because in my previous role, I had a fantastic boss. Like, he was incredible. We got on so well. We're still good friends now, although he wasn't so happy when I left. I had a fantastic boss, and I just didn't think that I could recreate that relationship with another person. I didn't think I would be lucky enough to have two great bosses on the trot. So I was really, really torn about moving away from a great boss and a great role that I had in my previous company and risking it for something that was completely unknown. So I'd gone through the whole of the recruitment process. I met some fantastic people, but I thought, oh, okay, it's still a little bit unknown. I'm still a little bit uncertain. Whereas I know my current boss, and I know he's fantastic, and I think he's going places in the organization. I know I want to go with him. So, so I originally said no. And the woman who was hiring me said, okay, I understand, but take the weekend to think about it. And she said, something her dad always used to say to her was, just because you have, found a great relationship with a particular boss or employee or whatever, you shouldn't let that stop you from making a move away from that, because you're staying somewhere because you've got a good relationship and it's kind of safe, whereas you're not going to grow if all you're doing is things that are safe. And I was probably a little bit, I was like, well, no, she doesn't know me that well. I absolutely know that this is not the same.
Right.
It made
Right.
me think. And so I did think, it's a cop-out really. Am I just staying where I know is safe, where I know I have a really good relationship, where things have gotten really quite comfortable? And I had to, look myself in the mirror and say, you always say you don't ever make the comfortable choices. And now here you are on the edge of making a super comfortable choice. So it was literally that question,
Wow.
saying, are you just being too comfortable with this? That made me think, oh, actually, I hate to admit it, but maybe she's right. So, so in the end, it was literally that, taking the weekend to think about it and to really examine what I was doing. Was I staying in a role because it was the right role, or was I staying there because my boss was awesome and we were really good friends?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I then went back on my no, and said yes to Experian, then had to
Wow.
resign from my previous role, which my boss actually took really well. And
Hmm.
he actually said to me afterwards that he thought I was making the right decision in going. He couldn't tell me that first because obviously he wanted me to stay.
Yeah. Yeah.
But he thought actually it was the right decision for me to leave at that point. So it was, yeah, I very nearly didn't join Experian, but I'm super glad that I did, because sort of that questioning forced me to like really examine my own decision making and think, okay, am I just trying to stay in what's safe rather than move into something where I'll be forced to grow even further? So yeah.
That's so cool, and I love the fact that because you had such a great relationship with your boss, your previous boss, that transition was so smooth, and also how
Mm-hmm.
supportive your boss
Yeah.
was. Like you couldn't say it at the time, but then like afterward, like yeah,
Yeah. He
good
couldn't, yeah,
move,
couldn't
good
know.
move, and
Yeah.
and then you've also had that relationship still, and that I'm sure that he's a mentor to you today.
Yes, absolutely. But I
That is
was really
so.
lucky that I got an even better boss when I joined Experian.
Oh.
So it all worked out. It all worked out perfectly.
What to you is important in a good boss, and especially for those people who are looking to move teams? Like what is it about a boss that you think like this makes somebody that I respect, that motivates me, that
Yeah.
encourages me?
I think for me, they need to be really honest with you, and they need to be willing to be honest with you when you've done something great, but also when you've not done something so great. I think that's what really defines a good boss from a great one, because it's easy to give somebody praise, but it's really difficult to give somebody critical feedback. And so, what makes a really good boss for me is somebody that can do both of those things with sort of equal grace, I
Mhm.
suppose.
Mhm.
Um, but also, it's somebody that that brings the absolute best out of you, that makes you want to go that extra mile to produce like your best work, not just good work, but your very best work. It's somebody who inspires you to just be that little bit better. So if you're at an 8 out of 10 one day, they inspire you to be a 9 or a 9.5, because it's impossible to be a 10. Nobody's perfect. So it's somebody that really, really can like test you when you need to be tested, but support you when you need that support as well. So they can give you a pat on the back in the same way as they can say, okay, what you did here maybe could have improved by doing X, Y, and Z. So I always judge my bosses on how they give me critique rather than how they give me compliments. Um,
Mm.
and
Oh wow.
yeah, I find that to be the most helpful.
I think also that's like the toughest thing I
Yeah,
think for a boss to do is to have to give that. Well, for some people, I think for most people that's the hard thing to do, is to give that critical feedback on
yeah.
something.
But that's when you
Um,
learn the most. I think, it's all well and good to say, "Oh, Louise, this was ace. You did great," and that's nice to hear. But it's also, when you don't do so great, that's when you learn something. So I think
mhm.
that's just as, if not more, valuable.
Yeah, and that requires, like you said, that relationship needs to be established, that
Hmm.
trust, in order for that feedback to really to
Yeah.
be meaningful. Because there's tons of people who could be very toxic, who can give critical feedback, and they're not somebody you respect, and you're like, well, they might be right, but I don't really care what the person
Yeah,
says.
that's true. That's very true as well.
You also, I was reading that you are also giving back to the community, and I saw something on your LinkedIn profile about STEMETs.
Stems, yeah. So yeah, so that's an organization here in the UK that's trying to encourage more young girls and women into STEM careers. So science, technology, engineering, and maths. Whether it's studying it at school, studying it at university, or going into those sorts of professions. So I went to an all-girl school when I was little, and for me, there was never oh, girls do these subjects and boys do these subjects, because we were all girls. It's an all-female teaching staff. Everyone did everything. So there was no such thing as boys do math,
Mm.
girls do the arts. So I just never really understood that distinction. And I didn't really see it on a day-to-day basis until I got to university. And I noticed that, there weren't so many girls studying chemistry or engineering or physics and things like that.
Mm.
And I always wondered why that was. And I realized that not everybody was as fortunate as I was to grow up in an environment where, women were absolutely equal to men, and they were encouraged to do exactly all of the same things as men, and they were taught that, there were no limits to what they could achieve. So organizations like the FirstMS, I try and do as much work with them as I can, because I think not everybody was like me and had those female role models and those female peers that they could sort of look to for inspiration and look to for guidance. So I think if I can go back to younger girls who weren't in my position and sort of help them and sort of show them that they can achieve anything that they want to achieve. If they want to go into physics, then they absolutely should. If they want to be like a chemical engineer, then, there's absolutely nothing stopping them. But I think, especially now, girls are being, and I'm not even sure where it actually happens, but girls seem to find themselves moving away from the STEM subjects. And I want to go back and try and encourage as many as I can to not follow in my footsteps, but follow whatever it is their passion, and not be dissuaded from that by the fact that they don't see lots of other people that look like them doing what they want to do.
I think that's beautiful. And I think that these are organizations that are needed in society. We need people to see themselves in these different leadership roles. Like you said, you were very blessed with that opportunity to be at a school where you were blind to that type of that mentality of like, oh, boys tend to be more the math and girls tend to be more maybe humanities. That didn't exist for you.
No.
And so you had a totally different mindset until you came to university. And so I think it's so cool that you're like now giving back to like help these young girls like see you and the work that you're doing, and they can see themselves in you.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's
So I think
fantastic.
I was just really fortunate, and it wasn't by design that I grew up in that environment. It was just so happened to be. So I think it's my job and duty to go back and sort of speak to young people and show them that they could do whatever it is they want to do. Just because they can't see it right now doesn't mean that it isn't out there and it isn't possible.
What advice do you have for parents who have young girls and they are wanting to encourage them in STEM? Do you have any advice for them to help with that encouragement?
Yeah, I think it's so. What, like I say, when I was a kid, I played with all a whole range of toys, mostly scientific toys. I will be honest. I was that kid that wanted a microscope and a telescope and a chemistry set and all those things. But I think it's just encouraging your daughters in the same way you would encourage your sons, just encouraging your children to be curious and to ask questions and to want to understand how things work. I remember when my mum wasn't very pleased with this, she bought me one of those like children's computers, like a VTech computer. And the first thing I did was get the screwdrivers out and take it apart, because I was really fascinated to see how it worked on the inside. She was annoyed, but she respected the curiosity. The fact that I just destroyed a brand new toy. But she respected the curiosity, and she always encouraged me to be as curious about everything as possible and to ask as many questions as I possibly could. But she also encouraged me to go out there and try and find the answers as well. So she wasn't the sort of person who was going to, I'd ask her a question, she'd just tell me. She'd be like, okay, well, why don't you go and try and find some information, and you can come back to me, and then we'll talk it through and we'll discuss it. So she encouraged that curiosity. She encouraged that independence of thinking and of, evidence finding. So I would just say that people should treat their daughters in the exact same way that they treat their sons, and to that curiosity wherever it might take them.
I love that. And how wise. I mean, that is like the wisdom that your mom had to not just answer the question, because she might have already known the answer, but she's like, I want to, increase that curiosity and encourage her to go find the answer and then come back and tell me what she found. Like that is there is so much wisdom in that because it's so easy for sometimes for parents just to like just give the answer to stop the questions. But if
Yes.
you want to encourage the questions, it's like, why don't you go find that out?
Yeah,
And
exactly.
you learn so much more that way.
Although I think sometimes she actually didn't know some of the answers. When my questions started to get a bit more technical, at that point, I think she's like, "Okay, you can come back and tell me because I'm not
Yeah.
sure." But but it was no, it was good.
Now, before we go, you've co-founded a company called Corporate Innovation Forum. Tell us about that.
So I, in my previous role to Experian was when I first sort of started dabbling in innovation within large corporates, and I found I just had tons of questions. That's like a theme in my life. I asked lots of questions. I had tons of questions, and I would meet other people who were working in similar roles because lots of large organizations now have innovation teams, and they'd be asking the exact same questions that I was, and we'd be like, okay, well, maybe we can find some other people who are also working in this space who might have some of the answers, and we can give some of our answers. So the reasoning behind the Corporate Innovation Forum was giving people sort of a community to ask those questions to and get answers from, and also share their own learnings and best practice. Because I think we're all facing the same sorts of challenges, and it doesn't make sense for us all to be asking the same questions and doing all of the work ourselves. Let's just learn from one another and beg, borrow, and steal information where we can. So the Corporate Innovation Forum is just that. It's designed as a group of people that can come together, share what they've learned, share their problems, share some of their solutions, and hopefully that will then help others that are going through the same sorts of things.
That's brilliant. Where can people go to learn more or to join the community?
So it is quite small at the moment. It is London based because it's largely just being run by me, and I can only be in one place at a time. So, so yeah, people can reach out to me on LinkedIn, or they can go on the corporateinnovationforum.co.uk website and sign up there. Yeah, but it's best just to reach out to me directly, and then I can sort of direct people in the right areas and maybe make contact with other people that I think would be helpful to them. So yeah.
Awesome, awesome. And for those listening in, I'm going to have a vanity URL pointing over to Luis's LinkedIn profile to make it easy to find it. Just type in ex.pn/Louise M. That's Louisem. And that'll bring you over to her LinkedIn profile so you can connect with her and ask her questions about how to get involved. Because that is super, super cool that you have, your curiosity is like a constant theme throughout today's show. But the fact that you're super curious and you're like, how can I bring in more curious folks? And you now built a
Yeah.
community and it's just growing. So that is so cool that you've done that.
No, it's been a lot of fun. It's been a lot of fun, and also it actually makes me better at my day job too because I'm bringing in all of the information that I pick up from other people and then using it to try and build the innovation community and experience. So it's really helpful.
That no doubt. Now, last thing I want to talk about is the award, the honor that you just got to be named
Yeah,
as the 20 women in data and tech. You were
yeah,
named as one of the 20. What a huge honor. Tell us about
yeah.
that.
Yeah, it was it's amazing, honestly. And having met the other 19 women and seen how all of the amazing things that they've achieved, it's wonderful to be in such great company. Is the first thing. But I found out probably March of last year. I had to keep it a secret until November, which was really, really difficult to do because I'm not so good at keeping secrets. So that was difficult. But it's no, it's a massive honor to be included in the list. But what I'm most looking forward to is the next 12 months of sort of being an ambassador for women in data and tech. And one of the main themes that we are pushing this year is, how do we influence young women at the point of, say, 16 or 18, when they're, like I was, making the decisions about what they want to study in higher education? How do we influence that conversation and that decision-making process to encourage more women into data and into technology careers? So over the next 12 months, we're going to be spending time with lots of young people, trying to, show them different versions of what careers look like and who careers look like. And yeah, just trying to be ambassadors for for the initiative, which is going to be really exciting, I think.
Well, that's fantastic, and congratulations on this huge
Thank you.
honor. It's so cool. I love the photography they did.
Oh
It is
gosh, I
so
hate being in
nice.
front of the camera. So that was a struggle. I take my hat off to the photographer because it's very difficult to get me to smile in a photograph, because I generally just look quite stone-faced in photographs. I don't need to look serious, but it took a lot of time and a lot of patience to break me out of my shell in front of the camera. So hats off to her for that. I think she deserves an award for literally. And if you look at the photo, I'm not actually smiling in the one that they used. So.
Awesome. Well, Louise, thank you so much for being on Data Talk today.
No problem. Thank you so much. I look forward to listening into future episodes too.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Data Talk. We share out new episodes every single week, and you can find the full catalog of previous episodes as well as YouTube videos by going to the Experian news blog. The URL is just experian.com/datatalk. And as always, we love hearing from our community, so if you have any comments or suggestions for future shows, please reach out. You can find us on Twitter at Experian Data Lab, or you can always reach out to me directly. My email is michael.delgado@experian.com. Take care, and we'll chat next week.